A very good morning to one and all present. I, Assistant Professor Avneet Kaur, on behalf of Bansanga's S.M. Shetty, College of Science, Commerce and Management Studies, extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the first session of the fifth day of 10 days virtual workshop on research methodology in social sciences organized by IQAC of Bansanga's S.M. Shetty College of Science, Commerce and Management Studies in association with Indian Council of Social Science Research. I welcome our resource person for the session, Dr. C.P. Gupta, Principal, Dr. Sridhar Shetty, Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Liji Santosh, Vice Principal, Professor Sandesha Shetty, all my colleagues and my dear participants. We began this workshop on 18th April with a series of enriching sessions conducted by eminent research scholars. Today, we will be starting with session on questionnaire designing, and for that, we have amidst us Dr. C.P. Gupta. It is my privilege to introduce our resource person for this session, Dr. C.P. Gupta, sir, who is presently a senior professor in the Department of Finance and Business Economics, University of Delhi, and was the head of department and the dean of Faculty of Commerce and Business, University of Delhi. He is MCom, MPhil in Finance and PhD in Finance from Department of Commerce, Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. Previously, he had worked as a professor and area chairperson at Management Development Institute, Gurgaon, for about 10 years. He had also worked as faculty in Sri Ram College of Commerce, University of Delhi, and School of Management Studies, Guru Gobind Singh Intrust University, Delhi. He has a great teaching as well as research experience of more than 40 years. He has contributed a number of research articles in various Indian and international journals and also has few research-based books to his credit. Dr. C.P. Gupta has guided a number of research students. He is also an area editor of Journal of Indian Business Research. He has also been awarded the Best Reviewer Award for the year 2014 by Emerald. He has also been nominated as expert to the Customer Service Committee of Board, Punjab National Bank, New Delhi for the year 2021, and also nominated as member of Valuation Standard Board of ICMAI, New Delhi. Sir, we are extremely grateful to you for accepting our information, and we are looking forward to have an enriching session from you today.
Thank you, Avneet. Thank you, Avneet.
So before I hand over to Sir, please note, dear participants, please post your queries in the chat box. Sir will address them during or at the end of the session as he prefers. So without further ado, I request Sir to take over the session.
Okay, Avneet, any participant can give the questions anytime.
Yes, sir.
I will be looking at the chat box, but if somebody wants to talk to me directly, he can also do that.
Sure, sir.
Okay, have a right to unmute them?
Sir, you won't be allowed to, we will unmute them. If
we will unmute.
Yeah, we'll unmute.
Okay, so ask the participant to raise their hand so that you can unmute them, and whenever they want to talk to me, they can talk to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right, so let's start.
Yes, sir.
So let's start. It says every day is a great day for us. So is today. So hopefully you will have wonderful learning throughout the day. and get best utilization of today. So let's start our session with a lot of positivity and lot of positive energy. And you have to have it throughout the day for your sessions. And let me start with two important thoughts. And you are because you think, and all researchers must think. That's very, very important for us. If you stop thinking, you stop doing research. So thinking is very, very important. And that's why somebody said you are because you think. So let's start with some important thoughts for today. It says, without data, you are just another person with an opinion. They say, in God we trust, all others bring data. If you say something, that will remain an opinion unless and until it's backed by data. You cannot say that I'm saying, therefore it is correct. No, we don't believe in that. Whatever you want to prove, disprove, whatever you want to say, you have to prove it with data. And that's why they are saying, in God we trust. All others bring data. And as a researcher, you have data with you. And whatever you are trying to infer, whatever you are trying to conclude, whatever you want to say, that should be supported by data. Okay, so nobody will accept your argument unless and until supported by data. Okay, think, what does this circle tell us? Anyone? You can put your responses in the chat box. What this circle tells us, I don't know. It's called golden circle. Circle of the life, continuity, that's what people are saying. But here we are looking at it from a different perspective. This is called golden circle, and it tells us three important things. One, why do you do what you do, and what's the purpose of it? Always ask as a researcher why we are doing something. And how do you do? That's another step. And finally, what you do, that makes a sense. But your work should start with a big, big, big why. Why you are doing something, how you are planning to do something, and what you are trying to do something. That's very, very important for all of us. So we have a very popular book that's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And you do it simply to prove it. To inspire and help make verbal words more visual. So they are saying why, how, what you have to understand. Why means what is the motivation behind whatever you are doing. How you are doing it, that means the process through which you are trying to do. And what you are doing, that means what exactly you want to achieve. That is something which you have to refer to. The target. So always keep these three words in your mind. Why, how, and what. But all researchers should start with why. So let's start our session with why, okay? And the moment you say why this is happening, questions comes to your mind. And these questions motivate you to seek answer for them. Unless and until you don't know what exactly is to be done, why you are doing it, you will not be sufficient, you will not have sufficient motivation to do that. Why also provides some kind of a motivation why we are doing it. And as a researcher, you should always ask yourself, why I'm doing something. So why do we need a questionnaire? That's the question. Because the session is on designing of the questionnaire. So we must know why do I need a questionnaire? Anyone? If somebody want to talk, raise hands so the organizers can unmute yourself. To collect information, to collect data, but why do we want to collect data? What for? Everyone is agreeing that we need questionnaire to collect data, but what kind of data we need? What for we need? Suppose I need data to know revenue of a company. Should I design a questionnaire, ask the people what is the revenue of your company? Rashmi, why do you say no? I mean, if the purpose of questionnaire is to get the data, I want to get the data about the question, about the company's revenue, about the company's profitability, about Indian economy's growth rate, about the GDP of the Indian economy. I mean, to investigate, to collect data, that's Vijay is saying, because it is available in the, Rashmi is saying it's available in the annual report. That's why you are not, you will not design a questionnaire. Okay, Sumitra, what do you mean by primary data? What kind of a primary data? Okay, I'm from Delhi. I take an example. Suppose Delhi government doesn't have the data related to how many infant mortality they have in Delhi. The data doesn't exist in the secondary data. That's my hypothetical assumption. Should I design a questionnaire and get the primary data from the people about the infant mortality rate? Anjana is saying to know which scale we can use to measure our data. First-hand information, Divanjali. If, let's take an example, if government of India, for example, doesn't know how many other gender is in primary school, should they design a questionnaire? That's a primary data. They don't know. They don't have the data. They are going to get that data first time. Similar is saying yes. Similar, why do you say yes? Should design a questionnaire? You must know what information you are going to collect from the questionnaire. And why do we need data? What for? What is purpose of getting data? What what do we want to do with the data? I mean, information for what? These are the questions. They must trouble you again and again when you think of designing a questionnaire. To prove ourselves, that's what Amitabh is saying. Okay, suppose you want to launch a particular new course in your college, and you have to decide the fee for that new course. Should you design a questionnaire, ask the student what will be the cost of this course? John is saying to support our claims and hypothesis. Mr. John, that I can do even with the secondary data. So why do we need a questionnaire? That's a basic question. Whatever you are saying, I agree with you, but that can also be done with the secondary data. So why do we need a questionnaire? We need data to know reality. And where that reality resides, that is, again, you have to look at. As a researcher, we are in a journey to search reality. Reality may exist inside a person. So you have a person and the reality may exist inside and may exist outside. How much return we are going to get from a share, that's the information which is available outside a person. But if you want to determine what is the risk appetite of a person, that information is inside the person. Why a person is not willing to invest in equity share, that reality is inside the person. Something which is there inside a person, not available outside. There you will find you need questionnaire to extract the data. We know that reality reveals itself through data, but is that data is representing a reality which is outside the human being? Or is it inside a human being? Okay. Give me two instances where you think questionnaire is required. Then I will show that in these two cases, we are trying to find out something from a person which is inside that particular person. And give me an example of two instances where you need data, secondary data, which is outside the person. Quick. Understand if a teacher is happy with their work life, right? Because that happiness resides within the teacher. And the teacher can tell you that, nobody else can tell you that. For that, you need a questionnaire. Absolutely right. Rashmi, Amitabh, to know the consumer behavior, but yes, utility derived. For all those things, you will need the questionnaire. But if you want to see the impact of the COVID on GDP of the country, GDP is impacted by COVID. For that, you don't require any questionnaire. Okay. Which is more risky, debt or equity? Risk preference, risk appetite exists within the person, but the risk of the debt and equity that exists in the markets. So you will get the market data and then you will find which instrument is more risky. So there you will be using, the secondary data. So I hope, yes, Vijay, the financial behavior, if you want to know behavior of a person, then you need a questionnaire. And most of the time you will find people doing work in the area of OBHR, marketing. They need questionnaire. And normally you will find the finance people and the economics people, they don't need questionnaire because they normally work with the reality that exists outside and reflected in the secondary data. To extract an answer for the problem, we need, data. So why do we need questionnaire? We need questionnaire to get the data. Why we need data? Because we have some research issues, research questions, and we want to answer those research questions. Therefore, I need data. We need data because data reveals reality. And if reality is related to human being, related to human behavior, related to human psychology, you may find in that case, questionnaire will be suitable to get the data. Okay? If you strongly believe that reality you are trying to find out is inside the person, then you have to conduct a survey. So your research design, because whenever you are doing any research, you need a research design. In that research design, you should say that we are going to conduct a survey. And we are going to conduct survey through questionnaire, that's what we say. So friends, you can collect data by observation, how the people are behaving, observe them, put them under your observation, go to the field, see, watch how they are doing it, or you can ask questions for them. And when you ask, you are conducting a survey. And if you ask in a structured manner, that means you are using a questionnaire. So you can ask questions in a formal manner, in informal manner, structured manner, or unstructured manner, written or orally. What method of asking is better? As a researcher, you have to take a call. Vijayji, I will come back to this, your question, whether should we collect data from Google form or not. Okay, I will definitely take up that question. Give me some time. Okay, so you have to decide what is, the method which you would like to use to get the information and the data. Suppose somebody is working on the child psychology. And suppose they are studying what is the impact of the video games on their anxiety level. How you will collect this data? When they play video games, are they anxious? Are they excited? I don't know. We have to prove it or disprove it, whatever research questions you have. How to get this data? No secondary data will be available. You have to work with the primary data, and for that you need a questionnaire. How you will collect this data? In a formal manner, informal manner, structured manner, unstructured manner. Shabnam, do you think a child of a 5 years age can answer your questionnaire? Is that possible, Shabnam? Interview method, informal. Yes. Because you have to understand they are very small kids, and they may not understand the complexity of your questionnaire, complexity of your questions, and at the same time, you have to make them comfortable. So maybe you collect data either through observation or through some kind of informal chat with those people, and that method you can make use of it. Okay. Another example. You want to study the impulse buying behavior of consumers. For that, you need data. How you will collect data? Nagaraj, yes, you can combine different methodologies to get the data. That's also possible. Yes, Amitabh, it will be formal, structure, and yes. Of course, we are not talking about the children. We are talking about the young people, middle-aged people, old age people who are really responsible for taking decision of buying. So it will be formal and maybe through a structured questionnaire. So now I think your mind has started working, and looking at the necessity of preparing questionnaire. When we collect data through structured or standardized instruments, then what is the advantage of it? One of the important advantages, it reduces error. Because everyone is asking, everyone has been asked the same question. So when you ask same question from everyone, then chances of error may be less. Suppose you get variation in the respondent responses. Some variations are bound to be genuine variations, true variations, which you cannot control. They have to be there. But some variation may be due to error. Okay. I ask you a simple question. Suppose you are doing a survey, and one of the question of that survey questionnaire is place of your work. Suppose this question is coming before you, how you'll respond to it. Quick, start giving your responses. Mumbai, right. Ajna, that's a suggestion. Somebody is saying Patna, location. Okay. Somebody is saying Mumbai. Somebody says Maharashtra. Somebody says My place of work is Worli. Somebody says my place of work is, say, okay, Powai. I think I've written correctly. Somebody is saying Bhopal. Somebody is saying, I mean, what exactly responses you are getting? Somebody is saying, somebody is giving you the state, somebody is giving the name of the city, somebody is giving you the name of the place in a city, some is giving you the name of the district. In that case, variation of course will be there, but these variations will have a lot of error. And as a researcher, you should avoid this variation caused by error. And a structured questionnaire, well-designed structured questionnaire help you in reducing such kind of error. It increases the reliability of the data. It helps in the codification, entry of the data, processing of the data, inferences from the data. Variation can be minimized, but of course, Nagarajji, you are absolutely right. There is no questionnaire, no instrument which will not have zero error. Some errors are bound to be there, and there may be a number of reasons behind it. The respondent is not a good mood. Therefore, you find responses are not reliable responses, and you may not be able to reach to a right respondent. There may be a number of reasons, but as a researcher, we should try to minimize that. Now let me define formally what is a questionnaire. It's a research instrument consisting of a series of questions and other prompts for the purpose of gathering information from respondent. It is a form containing set of questions submitting to the people to obtain statistical information. By statistical information, I mean sample information. A questionnaire should be designed in such a manner that responses can be easily tabulated, translated into findings and recommendations that satisfy the required objective of the research project. Never lose eye of your target. I'm asking question because I need to answer a particular research objective. So always keep in your mind, is this information that will be relevant for me to answer my research issues? Always ask that. Okay? While designing a questionnaire, one must keep the following considerations in mind. First, you have to ask, does it provide the necessary information that is required for research project? Is it designed for the convenience of the respondents? Does it meet your coding, editing, data processing requirement for the research project? Suppose I ask a question, why do you drink a cola drink? And it's an open-ended question, then people can answer this question. Do you see any problem in it? What's the problem with this question? Yes, Kavita, Shabnam, abrupt. Madam, I don't know what you mean by abrupt. Multiple answers, dissatisfied drinking need. Okay. Rashmi, you are absolutely right. You will get multiple answers. Some say I like. Some say this is my preferred drink. Some say I take it to quench my thirst. I mean, different persons will give you different kind of responses. What's the problem in it? Yes, Nutan. Different person, different answers. So what's the problem in it? I mean, why should I worry about it? It's very natural, quite understandable that people will give different answers. So what's the problem with me? What's the problem with this question? The difficulty will be in codification and processing. So suggestion is that try to have minimal number of open-ended questions. Use them only when they are essential. So normally when you are asking for some kind of a advice or suggestion, then you can use open-ended. Otherwise, try to keep as possible, as far as possible, close-ended questions, because they facilitate codification, facilitate processing, and they also facilitate getting necessary inferences. And I've seen, many times students come to us and say, sir, what to do with the data? I'm not able to process this data. And the reason behind this, that the question was not properly framed, and the data, the response they are getting, they cannot be properly codified. So I have to be careful about it. In short, a good questionnaire should accommodate all the research objectives in sufficient depth and breadth. Speak to respondent in their understandable language and at the appropriate intellectual level. I mean, I've seen questionnaire, okay, say, impact of mergers in banking industry on their profitability. Suppose somebody is working on this particular research project. You want to study what is the impact of the mergers which are happening in the banking sector on the profitability. Okay, so the research student prepared a questionnaire. Now I ask a simple question: who should be a respondent? In such a case, who should be a respondent? Hmm? Can any one of you give me an idea? Who should be a respondent? Anyone working in banks? Yes, banks officials and public or holders, people whose account in bank and dealing with the bank officials, all employees, bank manager or okay, stakeholders. Right. Let me take this response. People whose account in a bank and dealing with the bank. So okay, let's take merger of corporation bank with union bank. Okay, so what I do, I go to the one of the branch of the union bank and find out who are the deposit holders or having account in the union bank. Do you think the deposit holders are capable of answering questions about the profitability of the bank after mergers? No. Even the person sitting on the cash counter is not able to do that. Even some managers cannot do that. You have to look at people working in the corporate office and then talk to them, those who are comparatively at a high level of management. They understand it. Such decisions are not operating level decisions. They're highly strategic decisions which are taken at the top, and they are the people who knows what's happening. They can answer it. It's not that if I'm a shareholder of a union bank, do you think I can say whether the impact of the merger with corporation bank is profitable? I don't know. So you have to be very careful in selecting the respondents who are appropriate respondents. Okay? Convenient to be administered, to be filled in comfortable time duration before the boredom sets in. Facilitate coding, editing, data entry, and data processing. I ask a simple question. Suppose somebody is working on the household use of detergent powder and they have taken brands, Surf Excel, Rin, Tide, and others. And they're asking, need soft water, harmful to body, harmful to environment. Okay, let me take three. Okay. And suppose we have defined something. So somebody puts here 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 5, 1, 1, 1. How you will put it in your system? How you will put it, this data, the answer to this question in your database? How you will codify it? Can you imagine how can you codify this? Hmm? Yes, Anjana, how you will codify it? That's my question. How you will enter data? Suppose I'm entering data in the Excel sheet. How shall I do it? Likelihood scale is there, but how to put it? Giving number to each question. So I give a question 1. Should I give number to the branch or should I give number to the questions? Should I say question number 1, question number 2, question number 3, and then give the responses? How to do that? If you write question 1, what you will write below it? Question 2, Amitabh, in SPSS, SPS doesn't code the things automatically. You have to code. SPSS assume that you are intelligent enough to code. You know, you will find a lot of difficulty in codifying such kind of questions. And you have to be careful about it. You should not ask questions in a manner where you feel later on difficulty in codification. And don't forget, quality of data comes through a quality of questionnaire. And when you talk about quality of a questionnaire, we talk about reliability and validity of the data. And therefore, you have to be very, very careful in designing the questionnaire. So what are the steps you have to develop in designing a good questionnaire? Specify what information will be sought. That is very, very important. You should be clear in your mind what exactly you want. And accordingly, you ask questions. Must be clear about the information you need to answer the issues to be addressed in the research project. Don't try to extract that information which a respondent hesitate in providing. Either it is too confidential or too private or too personal to be shared with any other. Okay, like many people don't like to share their taxable income. So don't ask such kind of questions so that they feel awkward and they don't want to answer those questions. Try to ask only and the only information that are relevant for your research. For that, one should have absolute clarity about this problem. Don't ask anything which is not relevant for your research. Ask only those things which are relevant. Determine the type of the questionnaire and the method of administration. That is the next step which you have to understand. Should it be structured, unstructured? You have to take a call on it. Obtaining information through well-designed written questions or through showing pictures, telling stories about these pictures, or collecting information verbally or in writing. So many times the psychologists who work on the children's psychology, they tell them stories or show them pictures and try to get their responses. So it depends. Your respondents, your research issues, what exactly you want, and accordingly, you have to administer. Questionnaire will be administered by self or by hired personnel agency through mail, telephonic interviews, or through internet or through email. Other interviews will be conducted in phases. So, should we collect now I take that question. I think that person asked me this question. Yes, विजय जी आप ही बताओ. Anyone like to respond? Should we collect data from? Amitabh is saying yes. Why? Convenient, fast, and then you will save your efforts, your labor in data entry. All those things will be there if you get data through Google Form. Not necessarily, but helps to analyze in COVID period, right? As per the convenience of the researchers. Okay. What about the quality of the data which you get through Google Form? Storing becomes easy, that's there. No need to feed manually data. Straight away, the data will come in the Excel sheet. Nobody is trying to give me the answer. What about the quality of the data which you get from here? Less reliable. Anjana, why do you say it's less reliable? Reshma is saying quality will be same. Okay. Vijayji, tell me who will fill the Google form? Who will fill the Google form? Tell me. Quick, quick, quick. Who will fill? We are sending Google form to thousands of the people, but who will fill? Still, it's it's understandable that the respondents will fill, but who will be the respondent? Who has internet and qualified, extent to which respondent take interest in filling, but which respondent will take the interest? Nobody will take the interest. I receive many questionnaires online, but I don't fill any one of them. Why should I do that? I don't have a spare time to fill them. If somebody is sending you a questionnaire, do you think you will fill it? You will just ignore it. You will not fill it. Only those who have time and interest to fill. Right. So what does it mean? You will get responses from a particular class of respondents who have time, who are willing to fill, and many times who are they? They are your knowns. And you are asking them, you are requesting them, you are calling them, please fill up my questionnaire. You know what happens? Your sample does not remain a representative sample. It becomes biased. And that's, in that sense, I'm saying the data which we get from the Google form, the quality of it is having serious concern. So normally I discourage people to go for Google form. I don't know. You send a mail to somebody who is a deposit holder of a particular bank in the age of 60, 70. What he does, he asks his son to fill it. So the responses should come from X, not coming from X, coming from Y. And Y should not give you the answer. So biasness is there. So Vijayji, my humble submission is that if you are really doing a serious work, then collect your data through written questionnaire and not through Google form. Maybe you can supplement it through Google form, that's a different thing, but primary data source should be your questionnaire. Amitabhji, I'm not saying every time it will be right, every time it will be wrong, but chances are getting wrong responses, getting responses from the wrong respondents, getting responses from those people who are not representing the true population. Those are the issues with the Google form. Determine the contents of individual questions. That is very, very important. We should never forget it. How many questions need to be asked? What all to be asked in each question, that you have to decide. Whether questions that are related among themselves, for example, questions related to personal details or related to attitude toward their bosses, subordinate, should be put under one head or into one section. Not try to ask so many things in just one question. Always ask questions to you. Is the question necessary? Are several questions needed instead of one? Do the respondent have necessary information to provide? Will the respondent like to provide information about the questions which have been asked? All those things you have to understand. Determine the form of the responses to each question. Should the question be asked in the form of open-ended questions or closed-ended questions? Try to ask as far as possible closed-ended questions because they help you in getting responses with less errors. Codification is simple, processing is simple as compared to open-ended. Normally, we ask open-ended questions when we asking for suggestions, advice. Should close-ended be in the form of the dichotomous questions or multiple choice questions? You have to take a decision. Scale responses. If you want to capture the intensity of the respondents' answers. What do you think is the most in need of improvement in the present system of billing at MTNL? Open-ended question. Give the most important reason why you have selected the present brand of toothbrush. Suggest as per your opinion which is the most important function of parent-teachers association in the schools. These are the examples of open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions may be, do you think that this year inflation is going to be more than that of the last year? The India government has taken serious steps to improve Indo-Pak relations. According to your opinion, the growth rate in GDP this fiscal year is going to be greater than that of the previous year or lower than that of the previous year. These are questions which are having only two responses, and therefore we call them as dichotomous questions. You can also have multiple response questions like indicate your age, multiple choices. In the last month, you have visited your bank for multiple choices. Determine the wording of question. That's very, very important. Your questions should be properly worded. Use simple words, avoid any kind of unambiguous words, avoid ambiguous questions, avoid leading questions, implicit alternatives, assumptions, generalization and estimates. Avoid double-barreled questions. Let me take an example. In your view, which diet is most responsible for feelings of the trust in early childhood? Do you see any problem here? Any issue in this question? Yes, should not use jargon words. So it might be possible that some of the people don't understand what is the meaning of the diet. If you use pair, I think people will be able to understand it. So in your view, which pair is most responsible for feelings of trust in early childhood? Do you think that other people will enjoy the book? What is the problem with this question? What is the problem with this question? Lack of clarity. Others. Which book? Other people. The book was specified in earlier questions, so that's not an issue. And which book, that's not an issue. And clarity, Sandesha is saying, I don't know what you mean by this. Other people, what's the problem with other people? Asking about others. Rashmi, you are absolutely right. I can answer about my liking. I can't answer about somebody else's liking. I can say whether I enjoy, I don't enjoy, but I can't say whether other people enjoy it or doesn't enjoy it. So if you are asking questions, you ask question about respondent. And not ask the question from respondent about somebody else. Do you think that a company with a PTI of more than rupees 500 crores in a year should be considered as a large scale company? What's the problem with it? Anybody? What's the problem with it? What is PTI? Press Trust of India? What is it? PTI, the respondent had in his mind is post-tax income. The question is how many people understand it? So if you are using some abbreviation, you have to be careful about it, whether those abbreviations will be used by the respondent, will be understood properly by the respondent. So you have to be careful about it. Determine the sequence of the questions. So you may start with simple and interesting questions, then start with broad questions, narrow down to more specific question. That's called the funnel approach. Funnel is something like this. So start with something broad and gradually you move to specific narrow questions. Ensure proper placing of branching questions so as to ensure proper skip pattern. Do you have a car? Yes. Go to question number 1. No, go to question number this. So you should have a proper plan of the branching. And in case of Google Form, many times we find difficulty in branching. I've seen it. If you say, do you have a NRI account with the bank? If yes, go to question number this. If no, go to the question number this. To design such a branching in Google Form, I don't know how it can be done, but if it is done, it cannot be done in a simple way. Place difficult and sensitive information at the end of the questionnaire. Put personal information first to gain the familiarity with the respondents. But these are suggestions. These are not hard and fast rule. You have to take a call yourself. Determine physical characteristics of the questionnaire if you are, administrating it in physical form. Physical appearance of a questionnaire may affect the cooperation and thus the quality of the responses. Proper size, proper layout. Questionnaire should not give a feeling of cluttered or crowded appearance, properly stapled, bounded, and ending. Examine steps 1 to 7 again and again and revise if necessary. Pre-test the questionnaire and revise if necessary. So friend, these are the steps which are required for the development of a questionnaire. Now let me take some interesting cases about questionnaire. Rajshekhar was working on smoking behavior and related taboos in Indian society. He asked a question, is it all right to pray while you are smoking? Can you imagine responses? If you have to answer such a question, what will you answer? Think, think, think. Shabnam, Ashish, Vijay, Mitab, Nidhi. It's against the culture, but how you'll answer to this question? Josna will say yes. Is it all right to pray while you are smoking? You will say yes. What do you think people will say? Everyone, without any exception, responding to the questions with no. But researcher was aware of the fact that people do smoke while doing the puja and other things. So the question may be framed like this: do you smoke during the time of prayer, puja, worship? Then you may get better responses. So you have to be careful about it. Someone was working on a research project related to the habits of newspaper reading. Do you read newspaper? Can you imagine what responses the respondent, the question, the interviewer got, the researcher got? Everyone said yes. When the researcher got the responses, he was quite surprised as almost everyone said they read newspaper. But do you see the problem in it? What's the problem with this question? It's not common sense. We have to see the problem in it. Actually, I want to know the frequency of reading newspaper. And when you measure frequency, you have to give a time frame. Yes, Sandesha, you're right. I think Sandesh. So you have to say, do you read, how often do you read your news, often you read newspaper in a week, in a month, something like that. Only then you will get the right response. I mean, if you ask, do you read newspaper? I will obviously say yes, because I read it after 1 year before. Still, I will say I read. How frequently do you read newspaper in a week? That could be a better question to be asked. Do you hit your child? What kind of a question is it? We call them as leading question. It's leading question because everyone will say no. It leads to a specific answer. Nobody will say that with our child. But we know that parents do with their child. Maybe as a parent, you use some form of corporal punishment for your children, or you can draft it in some other way so that you get the right answer. Unmarried managers are more cold in their behavior than those of married managers. And one of the question, are you a bachelor? What should be the, if somebody is bachelor, somebody is not a bachelor, he will say no. If he's a bachelor, he will say yes. But you know the kind of the responses they got. Yes, I'm Bachelor of Commerce. Yes, I did my bachelor in psychology. Yes, I'm a bachelor from Punjab University. I mean, what you have in your mind when you use the term bachelor, what the respondent is understanding, that's important. Both should be at the same wavelength. It might be that your marital status, married or unmarried, are you married? That may be a better way to ask the questions. What's the problem with this question? What is the problem with this question? Vijay is saying we should have others, okay? Should have others. Does not cover all areas of occupation. The other will take care of it. Rashmi, anything else? And when the response is collected, you know what happened? Many people responded as industrialists as well as retired or self-employed. A person may be retired and self-employed. Person may be retired as industrialist. What's the problem in it? When you define the categories, they should be mutually exclusive and collectively exhausted. Mutually exclusive and exhaustive. Try to have mutually exclusive and exhaustive classes and not like the one given below. What's the problem with it? So we have to be careful about it. Are you aware of, the organization implemented a program which is called KISS, Keep It Simple and Sequential on software reliability. Are you aware of this program implemented in the organization? Yes and no? And if yes, what it stands for? You know, what is the responses they got? Are you aware of the KISS program? Yes. And what does it stand for? Keep it simple, stupid. So you have to be very, very careful about the abbreviations if you're using. Don't presume that whatever abbreviations you're using, respondent knows those abbreviations. Which one of the following group of people do you trust most? Take only one group. Do you see any problem in this question? Which one of the following groups of people do you trust most? You know, everyone will say we trust most members of our family. Because these are the set of the people whom we trust most. So you have to be careful about, the questions which you are asking for. Everyone will say here this, that means it will become a leading question. To a surprise, everyone take members of your family, and you can imagine why this particular response is there. Okay. How much of your office time as a percentage do you spend on ERP transactions, reports in PC? Please mark it. Do you see what is the problem in it? Actually, this should be here. What's the problem in it? If somebody puts tick here, somebody puts tick here. So what does it mean? So codification of such a question will become difficult. So avoid this kind of a continuum of the scale. Rank the following as, in your opinion, the major reasons for the recurrence of the same problem issue referred in this, highest fun, lowest aid. Insufficient training for the user, erroneous data filling of the upstream user, major reasons of the recurrence. Do you see any problem in it? When you say major reasons, what you are asking for? What is the meaning of major? Major means, what major means? I mean, think what major conveys to you, major reasons. Sorry. Major means important. And you are asking highest, lowest. What is highest reason? Think of the scale they are using. What is the lowest reason? If I say 1 here, is it the lowest reason? If I say 8 here, this is the highest reason, this is the lowest reason. Reasons cannot be high and low. Reasons are critical, important. You have to be very careful when you design a scale. Do you like to watch advertisements? What is the problem in it? क्या problem is question me? Anyone? I think you people got tired now. Quick, quick, quick. I'm not getting quick responses. Okay, see, it's a one question out of many questions. So how often? Ashish, what do you mean by how often? Type? Riyaj, I don't know what you mean by type. My problem is most often, sometime, very occasionally, how they are different. I'm a respondent. How do I know whether I should take most often, sometime? Very similar. So when you give the options, they should communicate clearly to the respondent. Look at this. What kind of advertisement do you like? Please rank as per your preference. All these instances I've taken from actual questionnaires. What's the problem with it? Rank. Rank is given without specifying the order. What is 1? What is 8? I don't know. So when you give a rank, you have to define a proper scale. Do you see a problem in it? Strongly agree, agree, can't say, disagree, strongly disagree. Actually, I'm measuring the degree of agreement. So at one end, we have strongly agree, other end, we have strongly disagree. अरे तुम लोग थक गए क्या? बोलते क्यों नहीं हो? Come out, quick. What's the problem in it? Problem is can't say. Can't say is not a part of your scale. Can't say should be a separate thing. It cannot be taken as a part of the scale of agreement. What is the problem in it? Salary structure less than 15,000, 15,000 to 25,000, 25,000 to 35,000, 35,000 to above. What's the problem with it? Whose salary we are asking? Respondent salary, family salary, household salary. Is it monthly salary? Annual salary? Which salary we are asking? No clarity. Cost of ticket paid by self-employed from business account in case of self-employed or business, others. Equal range is not an issue. Nagraji, that's not an issue. Cost of ticket paid. Which ticket? Ticket when you go for business trip, when you go for LTC, when you go for your personal reasons, all those things have to be mentioned to get the right response. Suppose you come across an issue or a problem while using the new system of performance evaluation and it is subsequently solved. Are you able to understand the cause of the problem and how to prevent its recurrence? Yes and no. What's the problem with this? Too many things. We are asking the same question. So if you say yes, yes for what? Do you face a problem? Are you saying yes for it? Do you understand the cause of it? Are you saying yes for it? How to prevent its recurrence? You are saying yes for it. I mean, so many questions you are asking in it in one question. Avoid it. One question at a time. Do you see the problem here? Not satisfied, somewhat satisfied, highly satisfied, inadequate, somewhat adequate, inadequate, no interaction, little interaction. I mean, every question, if has a different scale, the respondent will get confused. try to use as far as possible similar scale so that it gets registered in the mind of the respondent and he can, answer accordingly. If you change your scale very, very frequently, the mind of the respondent will not be adjusted and he will not give the right responses. Rank the following criteria from 1 to 4 in order of your preference for a room in a hotel: 1 most important and 4 least important. Friends, anybody tell me what is the difference between rank and rate? Should I say here rank or should I say rate? Rank is comparative. It might be possible that room size, natural light and ventilation, all are equally important for me. Yes, rank is an order. I would like to say that 1, 1, 1, 1, all are equally important to me. Quite possible. General appearance is more important. Natural lighting is important. 2, 3 that I can say. So when you ask, you should be clear. Are you asking for the ranking of the things or are you asking them to rate? Rate means no order. So friends, these are some of the examples which I thought let me discuss with you, and you have to be very, very careful in designing your question. One should constantly put oneself in the shoe of a respondent and see how she will get response as desired. Always think that you are a respondent, how you'll reply. Always visualize that. Always ask a question, why you are, asking a particular issue or particular question. So friend, that's all I want to discuss with you in this particular session. If you have any question, any doubt, please let me know. If somebody wants to talk, you can do that. We can unmute him. Thank you, Rashmi.
Yes. Sir, it was no doubt. I mean, I have been your student earlier also, so I know like how good it will be and it used to be. So I think you must have clarified all the doubts, but still if participants want, they can unmute themselves and ask questions to sir. John, please unmute everybody in case if anybody has got a doubt.
Questions. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Have a good time.
So nice of you, sir.
Should I give them
Yeah.
option to unmute or can they raise their hands?
So it written that Amitabh has asked a question.
Yeah,
See,
raise the hands.
I don't think somebody is raising hand.
There's one question, I believe.
Amitabh's questions.
Yeah.
Kalpana.
Amitabh, sir, you can unmute yourself.
Kalpana.
Hello.
Kalpana Rai. Yes, Amitabh ji, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Sir, should be open-ended question?
Should we?
Open-ended question, occupation?
Occupation?
Sir, occupation should be an open-ended question. He's asking that.
No. Because in that case, your processing will be difficult. You list down what are the important occupations you have and put a category others
Okay.
so that nothing is left out.
Okay,
In that case, the codification will be quite simple.
Yes.
Kalpana Rai.
Yeah, Kalpana ma'am, you can unmute yourself. I've given you the permission.
Okay. So let me finish it because you might be having other session.
Yes, sir.
So thanks everyone, and it's a wonderful session. Thank you. I enjoyed interacting with you people.
Sir, see you tomorrow evening
So
after
there is
your session. Yeah, there is one vote of thanks. Yes. Which version of SPSS has to be downloaded? Please
I've
let me know.
downloaded the trial version
Yes.
so that
Any
everyone,
specific version, software version?
if you download the trial version, it's same. I think it's 28.
28.
Yes.
Avani,
Yes.
Kalpana is saying unmute.
One sir, can you unmute Kalpana ma'am?
ma'am, she is on unmute itself. Kalpana ma'am, you can ask your question.
Okay, sir. John sir, you can unmute Ashwini ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, just a minute. Ashwini ma'am, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Yes, yes.
ma'am.
Ashwini, we are
Okay. Sorry, this is Kalpana here, sir. I was not able to unmute my audio from the device, so therefore. So with one question, you had asked that in that can't say option. So,
Right.
can we altogether remove that neutral option in our questions?
No, if you are using developing a Likert scale, the neutral has to be there. Only then you will have a continuum, no? Otherwise you will not have a continuum.
So, like you said, that can't say option should be put in the end. So,
Yes, because
on the same scale, we will put can't say in the end.
no,
Okay.
don't do that. Because otherwise, if they will think that it's a part of the scale, but actually it's not a part of the scale. It's no response.
Like sir, in that particular question that you showed, there were 5 options with can't say in the middle. So
Right.
if we are to remove that can't say, then should we leave it with the 4 options only?
That's your call. But if you
Okay.
believe that some people are having no opinion, they cannot say anything, you can
Okay.
say.
That has to be a separate question.
Lucky missing value, no response.
Okay.
It's a no response. I cannot say about it. I
Okay.
can't say whether they agree, they don't disagree, they are neutral. I can't say.
Okay, but okay. So I still have a confusion. So is neutral an option to be put?
So
Like
that
I like something very much. I like it. Neutral, don't like,
that
dislike
you can put
completely.
neutral, huh? In the
Acha,
middle,
neutral can
strongly agree, neither
neither agree nor disagree.
agree nor disagree. That you can put in the middle, disagree,
Okay.
strongly disagree.
And strongly disagree.
Now you have a continuum, no well-defined continuum.
Right, right. Okay, okay. Fine, sir. That is what I wanted to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashwini.
There is one more participant, Ms. Anjana Verma. Ma'am, if you can unmute yourself, we have given you the permission.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, can we, when we do the literature review, and if we find any questionnaire which is related to our research, can we?
Can we?
Anjana ma'am, you're on mute.
I think some technical error.
Organizers ask her to talk to me tomorrow, right?
Yes, we will. Yeah, the other resource person has
Yes,
also arrived, sir. And you can say what.
Yeah.
I think maybe our doubt is, sir, if when we go through review of literature, if we find any best questionnaire which is similar to our topic, can we incorporate that?
But you have to check whether it's a proprietary questionnaire or not.
Okay, that may be our doubt. Yes, sir.
If it is a proprietary one, it has a copyright, you can't use it.
Okay.
So normally we have seen they are not proprietary item, and you are modifying it according to your requirements.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful, insightful, informative, and interactive session. I'm sure all of us have a lot of takeaways from today's session. I now request Professor Ashish Navik to give away a formal word of thanks.
Thank you, Avneet ma'am. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So good morning to one and all present here. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks for this session of 10-day program on research methodology in social sciences. I, Assistant Professor Mr. Ashish Navik, on behalf of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Bansangha's SMCT College, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the resource person, Dr. C.P. Gupta, for his valuable insights. Sir, it was indeed a knowledgeable and engaging session. Sir, you provided us with all the information required for framing a quality questionnaire by highlighting the key areas to be considered while drafting a questionnaire. Thank you, sir. I am sure that the insights will be helpful for all of us in preparing a quality questionnaire. I would like to thank thank you, sir. Yeah. I would like, yes, sir.
Okay.
The resource person has already come, so we have to start the session.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
So much, sir.
I'll complete, ma'am, 2 lines more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to thank a benevolent management for providing us a platform for organizing such events. I also wish to express my gratitude to our principal, sir, Dr. Sridhara Shetty, Vice Principal, Dr. Liji Santosh, Vice Principal, Professor Sanjay Shetty, for being a backbone for the program. The success of the event is the outcome of your continuous motivation and support. I would like to thank the coordinators and teachers of all the departments for their contribution. I would also like to thank our technical support team for smooth conduction of the event. I would also like to thank every individual who have contributed in making the session a great success. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank all the participants for the active participation. Thank you one, thank you all.
So we are going to start the next session now, and I request Dawn to take over. Ma'am has already joined. Kripa ma'am is here. Kripa ma'am.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Dr. Santosh. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Yes, we'll start the session now.
Shall we start the session?
Yes. Go on.
So, good morning, everybody.
Ma'am, excuse
Yeah.
me, ma'am. John is going to give an introduction of yours and then
Okay. So good morning and a cordial welcome to all to day 5, session 2 of the WARC ICSSR sponsored 10 days virtual workshop on research methodology in social sciences, organized by the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Pansanga's SM Shetty College of Science, Commerce and Management Studies, Powai. Data processing is an integral part of one's research journey. The beauty and objectivity of research lies in the convergence of raw data into a sound and legitimate data. Qualitative research proceeds inductively by writing field notes that reflect the significance of events and experiences to those in the setting. The ultimate goal is to turn notes written to and for the researcher into a document intended for a wider and broader audience. Anselm Strauss in the book has rightly mentioned, any researcher who wishes to become proficient at doing qualitative analysis must learn to code well and easily. The excellence of research rests in large part of the excellence of coding. So to bring light to our session, we have amongst us an esteemed resource person for the session on data processing, field notes, coding and analysis, Professor Kripa Anand. Ma'am works as an associate professor at the Madras Institute of Development Studies, Chennai, Tamil Nadu. Her research focuses on the dynamics of local democracy and governance and the interface between governance and civil society institutions. A large body of her work is centered around the ways in which informal or customary institutions influence local democratic processes and shape governance outcomes. She was part of the TRC for Future State at the Institute of Development Studies, Sussex, UK, focusing on a decade-long study on the interaction between formal and informal local governance institutions in Karnataka, Rajasthan, and Pakistan. She was one of the principal investigators in a World Bank study on deepening democracy in Karnataka, which studied the impact of people's participation in making local democracy more effective, accountable, and transparent in 200 villages in 5 districts of northern Karnataka for the year 2007 to 2011. She has contributed to Tamil Nadu's 5th and 6th State Finance Commission reports on the politics of local taxation and continuing mismatch between funds, functions, and functionaries at the local level. She has completed a project with the World Bank on using P-tracking for village development planning process for village panchayats in Tamil Nadu, which integrates the spirit of participation with fast developing technology to help prepare participatory plans. Currently, she is coordinating a longitudinal panel survey of 17,000 households across Tamil Nadu in collaborating with the Tamil Nadu government. She is also leading the COVID-19 Pulse survey in Tamil Nadu that is designed to run once in 4 months to assess the impact of COVID on 10,000 households across Tamil Nadu. Ma'am is a distinguished resourcer and she has published in refereed journals such as Development and Change, Journal of Development Studies, and World Bank and World Development, and also national journals. Her work has been published as book chapters and working papers from Madras Institute of Development Studies, Institute of Development Studies, Sussex, UK, the World Bank, and so on. She was part of UniFM's advisory group for their flagship publication, Progress of the World's Women 2011-12, on the theme of In Pursuit of Justice. Ma'am, we are highly grateful to you and we are super excited to have you amongst us and to learn from you. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that, kind of a long introduction. It was very interesting for me also to listen to the previous speaker because I just logged in a little early, and a couple of things that I would just kind of take from that and inform the students and other participants, because I do mixed method research quite a bit. So I do both quantitative and qualitative. And in terms of questionnaire and trying to kind of prepare questions, it is a very, very challenging this thing. And Sir was absolutely right to say that you have to have a very clear idea of what is it that you're going to quantify. And somebody asked a question whether you can take questions from previously existing questionnaires. Many times what we do is that, again, Sir was very right about the proprietary ownership of the questionnaire, but something like NSS, census, or IHDS or PLFS surveys. So depending upon what you're actually trying to do, as much as possible, if you can take those, you can, and modify it, you can benchmark. So for example, if your definition of a particular concept is similar to their definition of a particular concept, then benchmarking data becomes interesting and important. If you don't have that, it becomes very challenging to kind of benchmark what you're finding against anything else. So keep that in mind when you are actually designing your questionnaire. So now, without much delay, I would like to start my PPT. So basically, today I'll be talking about analyzing qualitative data, which is one of my favorite themes, actually, because I think what qualitative does. One other thing, just like an insight, which I tell my students all the time during this research methodology workshop, is that to a large extent, we come from different disciplines, right? So you come from economics or other disciplines which are very focused on quantitative methodology. Then you come from anthropology, sociology, which tend to kind of focus more on qualitative. And then there is this paradigm war, like, between qualitative and quantitative, trying to kind of ascertain which is better and which is not better. And I always tell students saying that go with open mind. There is nothing superior or inferior about these methodologies. They are complementary and supplementary, actually. So basically, the way I would describe a quantitative survey is like a snapshot of a particular period of time, and then the qualitative research as a film, which tells you what happened before that particular snapshot and after that particular snapshot. So you get much more deeper understanding of what's happening in the entire phenomena that you're studying, right? So survey is a one-point interaction, whereas qualitative is a longer-term interaction which happens, before your, and that's one of the reasons why I like doing mixed method, because, we really understand. With quantitative study, you can generalize broadly, but with qualitative, you can go deeper into a phenomena, so it's more vertical, it can deeper into a phenomena and you understand much better. So since I'm just kind of coming in laterally into the analysis, I thought that I'll just take you quickly through what would be a qualitative research design, which you would have already done, but just to kind of reiterate, generally qualitative designs, unlike quantitative designs, are not linear, they're cyclical. So there is a lot of learning that happens within a particular qualitative research design. For example, many times in quantitative, you just design the survey, you pre-test it, pilot it, and then directly go into the field. You're never going to come back and change your this thing. All that would have been finished at the pilot state. But in the qualitative, we are on a kind of a cyclical mode. So there's interlinkage between different components. So there are 2-3 cycles mainly: research design, data collection, and data analysis. Within each of these, there are cycles. So there is a design cycle, which includes coming out with a research question, trying to kind of fit that question within the larger literature and theory, coming out with a conceptual framework, and trying to figure out what kind of fieldwork approach that you are going to actually adopt for this particular research design. So that will be your design cycle. In the data collection cycle, it's an ethnographic cycle. Here, you are now kind of finalizing your research instruments. Basically, you might be deciding that you will do in-depth interview, you would do FGDs, focus group discussions, or you would do case studies, or you might kind of do participatory research methods. So you could pick a number of this thing, but always pick wisely. There is no need to kind of, there is a tendency to add methods. Always try to kind of build your research. For example, when we are teaching qualitative, we always say that start with focus group discussions and recruit your members for individual interviews or deeper case studies in that focus group discussion itself. Who is being very vocal, who is not being so vocal, but might have some insights. Observing body language becomes very important when you're doing qualitative research. So research instrument picking up, participant selection, then the data collection, and inferences come in the data collection cycle. Now we are moving into the data analysis cycle, which we call as the analytic cycle. Here, the most important thing is the code development. How do you develop codes? How do you compare codes? Categorization and conceptualization of the entire data itself, and developing some sort of an inductive theory. Not all qualitative research leads to developing an inductive theory. There might be some that may lead to some theory, or you might be just reporting a phenomena, looking at how particular instance of or an intervention is working. So theory would be like if you're really looking into theory, but it is inductive, it is coming from the field. We are not going with a hypothesis and trying to test it out, but a lot of your qualitative data and analysis comes from the field. So what you can see is that these are all cyclical. Now, when I say cyclical, what I mean is that it goes in a particular direction in the sense that it doesn't necessarily go in a, say, clockwise. It can also become anti-clockwise. For example, from your field, this thing, you might come out with some understanding of saying that there is this particular phenomena that I had not thought about. Okay, so I want to kind of include it in my questionnaire. So you have the flexibility to bring that aspect back into your qualitative research design. So the cyclical nature of the qualitative research design is very important, and keep that in mind. So what exactly is the analytic cycle? The analytic cycle is the third cycle, as I said, in the qualitative research. So the core task that a researcher would do at this point of time is to develop codes. Develop codes is nothing but segregating your entire data into broader kind of themes that are actually relevant to your research question. You're describing and comparing. Once you develop code, you move on to describing what is your data. And then also you are actually going to kind of compare it. I'll come to the give you some examples of comparison. Then you're going to categorize and conceptualize, and then develop theory. Theory development, as I said, is not every time you might be developing a theory. You can, many times your qualitative research might end up in conceptualizing and reporting a particular phenomenon. These tasks are interrelated. They may be conducted simultaneously or in a circular manner. As I said, as you're categorizing, you might realize that, wait, this seems very interesting. Let me look whether somebody has said more about this and go back to this thing and develop a fresh code. So it can be kind of iterative process, and it can be repeated through the analytic process. What is, in a sense, the qualitative data analysis? We call it both an art and science. Why is it both art and science? So the analysis is both very structured and also a flexible activity. We are very bound. We are following a particular format. Many times there is an understanding, or there is a misconception that qualitative means just walking off into a village or a slum area or whatever your area of study is, and then picking up a random few people talking, then coming and just kind of writing up. It is not. It is very structured. It is a science. It is scientifically rigor. It has a very well-defined stages and steps that need to be followed. So it is very well structured. But as I said, it is a flexible activity. Many times this flexibility is seen as not being rigorous enough, but flexibility is actually making your entire research process much more actually detailed and more comprehensive in a sense. So it is science as well as an art. Science because systematic, following well-established procedures, aiming for rigor, and strongly evidence-based. So you are not making up stories. Your stories are actually coming from your data. So it is evidence-based. It's as evidence-based as any quantitative surveys. So it is actually strongly coming from your data. Only caution that I would give you is that if you're just finding outliers or just one phenomena that you notice in one interview, you cannot generalize it because you don't have adequate numbers. You're not looking at recurring patterns. So I'll come to that little later. Sorry. Art because it is interpreted. Okay, so you're interpreting the data. Researchers need to understand, interpret, and explain your data itself. Interpretation is generally subjective because it is coming from you. You are interpreting the data. You're interpreting. Subjectivity is there both within the researcher as well as the respondent. So we are acknowledging the subjectivity. We are acknowledging that both I might have a particular point of view, and because of that, I'm actually looking at it in a particular way. And the person who also is reporting or the respondent also has a certain subjectivity. And how do we bring this subjectivity into the entire process of analysis itself? So it is subjective, but it is a subjectivity that the researcher acknowledges and understands. It is not something that we are blind to. We are actually starting with the point that there is subjectivity, and that is okay. The subjectivity is adding a new dimension into our research analysis itself, right? Then what we are doing with the data is that we are persuading the reader on the credibility of data. So basically, it is up to the qualitative researcher to kind of, whoever who is reading your research paper, or a thesis or an article has to go back into that setting that you visited. It might be a village in Rajasthan, or it might be a urban settlement or slum settlement in Mumbai, or it might be a forested area in the hills of Tamil Nadu. It could be any of those, or an agricultural farm setting in, Karnataka. So it could be any of those, but basically when you are defining and describing your data, you are actually taking the person who's reading it to that particular scenario to understand what was the context. So you're persuading the data readers on the credibility of data by giving the context, by describing the locale, and then actually kind of talking to them or taking them through the data that you've collected. You are exploring complexities. You are saying that this is complex. This is actually deeper than what it appears to be. It may be kind of because of this particular subjectivity that it is looking like this, so the complexity could be coming from a person's positionality in the context within which they are, situated. So you need to kind of bring those complexities, also the nuances, when somebody is kind of, you're asking whether there is a domestic violence at a household level where other members may be present. The woman's facial experiences or expressions will give you a lot of understanding of whether there is a domestic violence situation within the household. Nobody is going to talk openly about very sensitive topics like domestic violence when other people are present. But it is up to us for researchers to kind of notice their facial movements or their kind of the way they might react or the body language, and try to understand and maybe try to probe that later. So your even describing has to be very nuanced as to how did you come through this. Nobody's going to walk in and ask these questions directly. It is going to be kind of a process where there has been enough rapport building, or after which you will then talk about some sensitive matters in the privacy of the person's requirement. So it is exploring complexities as well as nuances. As I said, it is both scientific and structured, at the same time creative and interpretive. So both these aspects are equally important when you're analyzing qualitative research. So don't forget that. Don't report it like a survey. It is not just numbers. So in mixed methods, Johnson and Ogbuensi actually kind of give a very interesting understanding of mixed methods. They say numbers give precision to words and words give meaning to numbers. So here, actually what you're doing is that you're giving meaning to kind of the findings that you are coming across. So it is not just that what percentage of children are accessing midday meal scheme, or how many women have accessed PDS ration, or they're part of SHG or whatever it is. It's not a very kind of this thing. You are actually going beyond the numbers and giving words or meaning to the numbers. So there are different approaches to the analysis itself. You can do discourse analysis. You can do content analysis. Content analysis comes from the data basically. And then you can, from the content analysis, you can take it to thematic analysis. And finally, again, the theory building, it's a grounded theory, the theory that is actually coming from the field. So what are the tasks that are there in qualitative data analysis? Now, first of all, you need to prepare data. Okay, so when you people go into the field, one of the biggest, unlike, say, for example, quantitative, you have questionnaires, right? So you have questionnaires, you might have paper questionnaires, you fill it up, and then you have all that together. But when you go for a qualitative, either you're recording a interview or an FGD, or you might be taking down notes. Okay, so it's very, very important to prepare the data. First of all, you need to take extensive notes in qualitative. Nothing is unimportant. Everything is, whatever you do, wherever you go, what happens is very important. The context within which you're having the conversation is also equally important. I'll give you some examples a little later, but I just want you to get this understanding that preparing the data is a very important aspect, because if your data is not good, if it is not properly documented and properly collected, it can't be like, something that you've written in some notebook somewhere, and then you go to another this thing and there's no continuity, and you might be asking different questions. I'm sure somebody else would have actually given you a lesson or a lecture in how to prepare individual questionnaire as well as focus group questionnaire. So, as I said, it is cyclical. You can go back and change, but it is up to you to ensure that whatever the changes you do, that you collect from all your this thing. You can't collect one set of data from flexibility doesn't mean that you collect one set of data from one set of respondents and the rest of the respondent get a completely different questionnaire. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that more or less the questionnaire remains, or the format of the questionnaire remains almost similar to all the people. But right in the beginning, when you are pre-testing or when you're trying to kind of find, maybe into your 15th interview, you find that there's something very interesting that is emerging from the field, which you had not thought of. You have the luxury of going back and adding it to it and collecting from the rest, and maybe going back to your previous 15 and also asking them these questions. Okay. So one of the easiest way to do is to do a FGD. So at a go, you're getting it from a number of people. So preparing the data, developing codes, coding itself, and analysis are the key tasks that you have to do in a quantitative data analysis. How do you prepare data? So how, as we said already, it is usually in written transcripts, you've written notes, but you could be taking a photograph, it could be video, it could be a short snippet of something, it could be a folk song that depicts the life of the women in rural areas, or it could be a classroom event that you observe as a participant observation in a rural school, how a class is being taught. So it could be a number of things, but generally it's both audio, visual, as well as written transcripts. So it's up to you how you use your audio and visual data. They always have to kind of supplement what you've already kind of collected as part of your key methodological approaches or instruments such as individual interviews or FGDs. Now, this textual data, generally, it is in the form of the local native languages that you are actually going to be having discussions in. Nobody is going to walk into, unless you're going into a very highly urbanized households that will only speak English back to you. Most of our data is collected in the local languages. Okay, so you are going to be writing it in those local languages. And when you bring back the data, you need to kind of translate it, because if you're going to be submitting your article, thesis, research project or anything, it has to be generally, it is in English. So you need to kind of translate it. So one thing is that to keep in mind is that at the level of translation and transcribing. So for example, transcribing is also that you recorded something audio and then you are actually writing down. Okay. Keep in mind, don't try to edit anything at the transcription state. Okay. When you're transcribing and translating, to the extent possible, don't edit. Try to kind of use the entire data set to actually transcribe. And I mean, you could keep, for example, if there are some introductory this thing and the conversation tends to meander sometimes, you might kind of going out of the subject matter probably. Those you can keep out if you want to, but generally what we do is that as much as possible, we'll keep the flow of the conversation going when we are transcribing as much as possible and translating also. So editing at this point of time before you analyze can be actually very counter effective. So always kind of keep your detailed notes intact. You can do the editing at a later stage. Okay. So the purpose of the research determines how detailed and verbatim the transcripts need to be. For example, you are trying to find the discourses of local rural women in in, say, Udaipur in Rajasthan or something like that, compared to somebody else in Gujarat, then you need to have very detailed verbatim translations. If you're generally trying to kind of see whether participation of children in Anganwadis have some sort of a nutritional effect on the children's well-being itself, it need not be very verbatim, because you're not doing discourse analysis here. You're doing more into kind of looking at the qualitatively whether children attending Anganwadis tend to do better in terms of their well-being. So you actually have to, your research question will dictate how detailed and verbatim the transcripts need to be, and the translations also. So as I said, I'll repeat again, this is very important. This is a mistake that a lot of people starting out in research tend to do, is to editing it at that level of the transcript. Please don't do it. Keep all the transcripts as it is, and then you can use whatever markers to kind of start your coding process. You also need to log your data very carefully and annotate it. So what ends up happening is that you collected so much data, you don't know who is talking. So every transcription need to have some basic details. When was this done? Where was this done? Who was the speaker? What time of the day it was? And any other detail that, how many people were there, and was it a kind of, and your impressions also you need to kind of capture at that point of time. You can do it as a separate note or at this thing, but annotating and logging them is very important, because then you know exactly how many interviews have been done. And then you also know that, say, for example, on last Tuesday, I went and did an interview and I need notes from that. That lady said something very interesting. Now you have bulk of these written transcripts. Unless you have noted down the date and time, etc., and even in one day, you might have done 5 interviews. So in order to find that, these are very important. An identifying number. See, one of the biggest foundational stone of qualitative research is to ensure that you maintain confidentiality. You anonymize all the data. So, because qualitative is more deeper than quantitative. Qualitative, we are opening up, people are actually sharing their innermost, it could be aspirations, or it could be kind of desires, it could be experiences, it could be as sensitive issues like health related issues, it could be violence, it could be all kinds of things. So one of the first things we need to do is that, saying that we will not reveal the name of the respondent at all, and we will anonymize the data. So that is a kind of an ethical consideration that qualitative research carry with them when they go into the field. And that is a ethical consideration that you also need to kind of, you're morally bound to kind of make that ethical promise to the respondents that you will not be actually revealing their names. So this is very, very important. Keep that in mind always. Even when you're referring to it with your friends, as much as possible, do not reveal the names of the individuals with whom you have actually kind of had the discussion or an interview and collected. You can say a lady from such and such a village said this, but not say, Rani from X village said this. So don't ever mention names and stuff like that. This is very important, because this is how you start building a kind of a confidentiality in your qualitative data and research process itself. So an identifying number, category of informant, where when the interview was held, all the details have to be logged. Anonymize, remove all identifiers like position, cell, location, etc. Can replace with a code or a pseudonym. Now, definitely we will not do it at very early stage, because I need to know who has said what. And so we will do the anonymization more or less at the end. When we are actually writing up stuff, that is when we start doing anonymization. So what I would suggest is that have an Excel sheet with all the original names of the places, like it could be village names or a slum name or whatever, and geographical location. Then the names of your respondents, like, they could be panchayat members, they could be SHG women, they could be school chief teachers, They could be health workers, ANMs, or forest officials. They could be, sex workers. It could be, or, slum dwellers. It could be a whole range of people that you are actually listening. Their name, their position, and then their whatever. Then what you can do is that then you can actually kind of have another column and then replace it with your pseudonyms or a code saying that Rani becomes, Anjali or something like that. And then you replace the name, some gaon with some sheher or something like that, so but unless you you always as a researcher need to know who actually were the original respondents. So maintain your master file, which is very important, which is logged, annotated, everything with all the identifiers. And your second master table will be a copy of the master table with additional columns that will have your pseudonyms, so that you don't make the mistake of, inferring something to somebody that might not be correct. Okay? So how do you develop codes? So what is code actually? Code is something that is it's a theme. So for example, I'm working on, let me give you an example. Say we are looking at the self-help group movement or a program in Tamil Nadu. Yeah, I'll use that because that is the example I've given later also. So let us take Tamil Nadu situation where we are looking at the self-help group movement, and we're trying to see whether self-help group movement itself has made a difference to the lives of the women. So broadly, I would be looking at what are the activities that they do in terms of, as members of self-help group, and what kind of impacts they have had. And I would have looked at the literature surrounding self-help group movement, and I would have kind of come out with saying that, okay, there is something called economic empowerment, there is something called women's empowerment, and probably those are the two very common quotes that I would have seen, categories that I would have seen. So I start looking at the data now. I've done a whole bunch of interviews with self-help group women and their family members, etc. So I'm looking at the data from the self-help group women. So I'm trying to now develop codes. Now, nobody in the field are going to say that I am economically empowered. Nobody is going to kind of give you the code. They will give you a proxy to that, and that will become your code. Okay, so the proxies could be that I can now repay my debt, or it could be saying that I'm now helping with my children's school education or giving their school fees. I invested in an asset, or I paid off, or I contributed to the household budget. Or it could be that my husband asked me to take a loan for him from my SHG. Or it could be that we had a severe case of health crisis in the household and I was able to pay the health expenses. Okay. Now, all these, so you can see the economic empowerment will come from a range of sentences, comments, and explanations. Okay. They're never going to be economic empowerment. Nobody's going to say that I am economically empowered. They're just going to say it in very, very, very different ways. And many times, one of the challenges is that of data collection, particularly in rural areas, is that rural women generally tend to kind of be hesitant about talking about these things. So it is up to you to kind of go on probing to see in what different ways that they might have actually kind of utilized this SHG, savings that they are doing. So when you're going with, say, SHG, economic empowerment, you know already that you're going to start with some set of codes, okay? Now, these codes and themes are important because, they are coming up again and again in your data itself. When you're reading the data, everybody's saying that, yes, I'm now able to repay debts, or I'm now saving, or I bought chicken, or I bought a goat. It could be anything, So it is kind of going on, coming up. then it is also kind of being repeatedly mentioned by the participants. And it addresses the key research question itself, like the economic empowerment. Has the women's self-help group movement led to economic empowerment? Now, if it is going on, coming up, then it becomes your important code, okay? Now, the purpose is to kind of, it identifies different topics, okay? And then themes within the data itself, topics and themes within the data, and it allows you to mark the data set with these codes in order to conduct a focused analysis. Now, you can't say that what percentage actually, if you're kind of describing some 60, 70 interviews, you know, for everybody, you are not going to say that this person paid off their debts, or this person helped in school education and things like that. You see how many, like out of your 80 interviews, how many people are saying it. If more than half are saying it, then it is a kind of a very important thing that is coming up, okay? Economic empowerment, more than half or nearly all your respondent probably would be saying it. So that's like one of your very important codes, okay? Then the second subsequent codes might be that, you know, you part of your respondent might be saying it. For example, women's empowerment. Some of them might be saying it, not all of them will be giving you instances of examples that will give you an idea that there has been increase in agency of women and it's led to some sort of empowerment of women themselves. But then there might be a very small group that will actually say something that you have not even heard of. This we call what is called as in vivo codes, the key codes that are actually coming from the field, which we had not thought of. So be very open to in vivo codes because they are the ones that are very important. So two level of codes, broad domain codes and more detailed codes, okay? So codes are identified on larger literature, as I said, or questions that drive your study, which is very deductive, or it may arise from the data itself, as I said, inductive, okay? These in vivo codes are specific terminologies or phrases or expression that will be used by participants that signals an emic concept. It's like coming from the inside. It's not coming from outside. It is inductive. So let me give you an example, you know, for those of you who might be kind of wondering, what does this in vivo code mean at all? Again, it will not come as a broad category. And when you see my example later on, you will understand what I'm trying to say. But say, for example, when we were looking at this women's self-help group, this was a qualitative evaluation we had done in 40 panchayats. It was part of a mixed method evaluation where quantitative evaluation had been done in about much larger sample. And I was actually managing the qualitative impact evaluation. So we found economic thing, as I told you, I gave you a range of phrases that are catchphrases that are given, which actually then become the part of a code. But there is something that was coming up, which was very interesting, which we had not thought of, you know. So women were saying that now we want to give back to the family, okay, and we want to give back to the society. And we owe it to the society to do these things. So this came up, and this was not a very large number of people reported it, but there were significant number of people saying that now we want to give back to the society. Now we want to give back something to the community, you know. So we termed this as like we brought all these various kinds of sentences that refer to giving back to the community and called it downward accountability. So that downward accountability became a broader categorization, and all this giving back to the society or the community and wanting to do something for the community, those became the codes, okay? So how do we do the coding? Generally, like, I know there are a lot of, I'll give you a set of this thing, code software, qualitative software itself. But if your data is small, you're not doing like 40 panchayats and like 200 this thing, or it's not a longitudinal qualitative study, then you can use Word very easily, okay? So what you can do is that, so for example, you decide on a particular color coding. Color coding works very well. And I generally go with color coding because it's also kind of, it pops up very quickly. So you start marking, you first of all decide what your color codes are. So for example, your economic empowerment may be green, your women's empowerment may be like yellow. You could have, as I said, political participation could be, say, orange. And then blue can be, public action, or downward accountability could be gray, something like that. You decide among your favorite colors, also depending upon how many of these codes or themes that are emerging from your data or from your research itself, you can decide on the color. And then as you're going through the text, if there is one section where we are saying that, has this been helpful to you in terms of in financial terms, or, has it had an impact on your income, then you start marking those answers in yellow. Okay. Sometimes the entire paragraph might be very relevant. Then you mark the entire paragraph as yellow because that's your economic empowerment. Sometimes they might be talking a lot of other things, and then they might just say that, I was able to pay the marriage expenses of my sister-in-law. Then only that one sentence you code it and a yellow color. So you code it, and then what you do is that all the yellow colored codes then come under one particular theme. Green colored codes come under particular theme. Orange colored come. So, similarly, then you can reorganize it. So first thing you do is that take your entire transcripts as they are and then start color coding. So you can color code, you can kind of highlight it. You can tag the entire text with comments saying that this section refers to, you can choose whichever way you want to do. I prefer color coding because it pops up very quickly. One of the very important thing here is that, building codings are like building blocks of a good data analysis. If you don't have very good coding mechanism, then your data analysis is going to collapse. Okay. So poor sloppy coding actually will limit your analysis. It can't take you beyond a particular point. So you need to go back and reread your transcripts. Did I ask the right question? Many times when we come back and read it, we feel that, oh my God, I should have probed this further. Why didn't I think in terms of asking more questions on this? Sometimes we'll be having a conversation. That qualitative is not like just a question and answer. It's a conversation, right? So when we are doing that, what ends up happening is that it might go off in a different tangent. And it's up to the researcher to kind of slowly bring it back to the subject in hand. But many times the tangential conversation is already answering certain things. And we need to capture that also. Or sometimes the tangential thing might be telling you something that you had not thought of at all. So that's equally important. So coding, understanding your data, where is it coming from? And another thing to do is that don't blindly do your interviews at a stretch and then come back and look. Do a first set of, do an introductory, I would suggest that do a pre-test and a short pilot even in qualitative. It doesn't hurt. Pre-test generally is mainly to see whether your questionnaire is okay. Are people able to understand what you're asking? So pilot is to see what kind of response are you getting and is it satisfactory or do I need to ask more? So it's always flexible, keep it open-ended so that it can go into a next level of analysis, but you try to kind of do a bit. And then once you finish, say one panchayat or one village or whichever location, come back and go through the entire transcripts, at least one or two, which you would have found saying that, oh my God, this was interesting. If you're doing a interview, it suddenly pops up as, oh my God, this is very interesting. Let me kind of probe a little further or things like that. That's also it could be another time, it could be just a focus group discussion. Make it a point to kind of identify all the people part of that focus group and then recruit your individual interview or case studies from that. Because somebody would have said something very interesting. Somebody wants to say something, but might hesitate. These are worth probing further. Okay. So come back, read, understand, try to kind of look at it, because if you don't read your transcripts right in the beginning, you might be missing very important avenues of exploration. So it's very important that you come back and read and then look at the data and then go back to your next thing with the understanding, hindsight of the data itself. So it's a dynamic and open-ended process. There continuously new codes get added, as I said, because what is true in one village might not be true in another village. And it might kind of need more disaggregated and altered meaning it could lead to. So you need to kind of this thing. Sometimes, initially you might think, oh, this is very interesting, let me put it. But by your 50th interview or a 30th interview, you might think that, oh, it actually that really doesn't make sense. So I will revise that code into something else. So you can do that. So be very flexible, it's a dynamic process. Keep that in mind. Once you're coded, it doesn't mean that it is set in stone. It is actually open to kind of being reinterpreted. And as your understanding increases of a particular phenomena, it is actually reinterpretable. Okay. So as I said, it could be a sentence, it could be a passage. So for example, I'll give you another example of a in vivo code. When we were actually doing some study in Karnataka, that's the longitudinal mixed method study we did on deepening democracy in panchayats, one word started coming up called ring amount. One person actually mentioned it in, it was done in 10 panchayats. So we had one ethnographer for each panchayat, and we used to meet, all of us used to meet once in 2 to 3 months to kind of discuss what's happening. And one person said, so there was this thing happening and somebody mentioned ring amount. And then suddenly we said, what is this ring amount? Then we started asking others, is this coming up in this thing? And some people said yes, some people had not reported it, some people hadn't thought about it. So we sent everybody back to kind of say that is ring amount something that is recurring. And then in the next meeting, we found that in almost all 10 panchayats, ring amount was happening. So this is how you kind of build new codes and kind of take it forward. Yeah. Next is analysis. So you have built all this data codes, right? So you marked all your sections and you kind of segregated them according to larger themes. Now your next core analytical task is to describe your data. So description is very important. And then you do the comparison. Comparison, again, I'll come back to your comparison, giving you example. Then you do categorization and conceptualization, and finally theory building. Yeah. So core analytical task proceeds again in a cyclical fashion. It could be like a spiral, going up from description towards theory. So it is actually kind of in a spiral. So it is gradually builds up by focusing on small parts of data, then constructs large edifices of textual analysis itself. So you start from smaller kind of vignettes or examples, and then build up saying that how this was reflective of a larger kind of a scenario itself. So description is very, very important. So basically you're taking somebody back to the villages. As I was driving down the highway towards this particular village, women were carrying, whatever pots of water on their head, walking towards a village which was about 4 kilometers away. Instinctively, the reader understands there's a water problem in that village, right? Without you having to say that there's water problem in the village. When you describe these women having to kind of carry water from, say, outside the village into the village, you're giving a description. Okay. It could be also saying that it was mid-afternoon during, or it was like morning on a Tuesday morning, in the village, children were all scattered, playing and things like that. The school rooms were empty. You are now giving a scenario saying that the school system is not working very well. And then you can take it further and say that how, the teachers are not coming on time, or what kind of learning losses have these children kind of, suffered, etc. So basically kind of describing, foundation of the qualitative data analysis is providing a very rich description, and detailed description, which is actually what actually drives your qualitative research, the what. It's not how, like the whats and the whys are actually where your qualitative data is actually coming. This is fundamental. Thick description, a lot of you would have heard the contextual elements that give meaning to an event, action, speech, or behavior, which distinguishes face value description from a deeper understanding of what's going on. What does this mean? Now, thick description is something that gets used often, gets ignored more often than it gets used. That is because people don't think about the context. Whenever we are sending people to do research in the village, if possible, we send 2 people, if possible, not always. One person to conduct the focus group discussion, one person just to kind of observe the body languages, the number of people who come and go, what are they talking, and how women stop talking when men start standing, around them and kind of trying to comment. So these are some of the things that you need to capture. So for example, you're sitting in a woman's house and she's talking freely, and suddenly her mother-in-law or a father-in-law or an elderly person or a husband, somebody of position of power comes into the household, the way she starts talking might change a lot. Or you might be kind of talking to her and her husband might be loitering nearby, and she chooses her words. She goes to say something and then she pauses and changes the word. Yeah. Or she's constantly watching whether he's hearing her. So these are the text description. You need to give it because this actually tells you what is actually going on. Is she being candid? Is she actually telling you what is going on, or is she being kind of constrained by what is happening around? So this itself gives you, it's a kind of a power dynamics. It gives you the additional understanding of why she said what she said. You can always follow back with an additional interview to kind of catch her when nobody is there, and then get more details on some of these things. So it's a very important aspect of this thing. Comparison. Now, comparison can be, it basically what you're doing is that, you're studying something, but it is always comparative, right? So it contributes to thick description by bringing out, distinction between different kind of variables or different elements. It finds patterns. Say, for example, in dry villages where there is no irrigation, generally there is a problem of water. So you compare that vis-a-vis villages which are irrigated and have access to water. So it could be geographical location. Within a single village, if you're talking about women's empowerment, you can compare across how the word empowerment itself is defined by different participants across your sample, or how do educated women talk about it compared to uneducated women, how young people look at this vis-a-vis older people, how urban looks at it vis-a-vis rural. So even if you don't do anything, you do it in one village, you can take caste as a comparative variable and see, do women of, for example, you're looking at mobility, okay, mobility of women, how mobile lower caste women are compared to upper caste, how mobile are Dalit women compared to OBC women, how mobile educated women are compared to uneducated, or like women who are part of SHG vis-a-vis those who are not part of SHG. Is there a difference? So the comparison is very essential. Okay. Now it can be pre-identified categories, as I said, or it could be across categories that emerge from the research. You find that some women are talking differently. So for example, I'll give you one example from one of our own participatory research method that we have done. We were trying to kind of assess well-being of the household using PRA tools. Okay, so we were doing it in the ground and people were choosing stones to indicate well-being of households. When men did it, they picked up one household and put a large stone there and said that this household is well off and the well-being is high. Why? Because they have a lot of land and they got money, they're doing well economically, etc. When the women came and did it, they put a small stone there. So we asked, that was quite a contrast between the big stone and the small stone for the same household by two different set of groups, men and women. So we asked the women why, and women said that the man is a drunkard. He beats his wife every day. What if they have money? There is no happiness in that household. Children are scared of the father. Nobody is happy in that household. So how can we say they're well off? So you see, there is a perceptive difference, right? In another context, which was we were looking at a forest department program, men wanted to build men wanted timber trees to be put, whereas women wanted trees that bear fruits or yield that harvest every year without having to be cut. So these qualitative differences come from the field, many times from your own data. Okay, so you need to be very intuitive to your data to see who is saying what. So across categories, different village habitation, etc. I've already said. Then coming to the categorization, it draws from thick description, moves the analysis to a higher level of abstraction. It now starts, you have coded, and then you start bringing the code together into different categories. Like I said, economic empowerment, women's empowerment, etc. So the codes will be like helped with debt, cleared loans, or it could be like paid household expenses, or it could be help with school fees. Those will now be clumped together under a broad category of economic empowerment. So you start clumping the data together and bringing it together. It is both founded on conceptualization and also it leads to it. It is coming from it. When women are talking about money, that we are moving towards conceptualizing this into as economic empowerment. It may emerge from theory. You already know that SHG movement makes a difference to the women's this thing itself, or it could be deductive. It could be testing a theory also. It could also be emerging from the this thing. It can be developing from the ground, or it could be tested on the ground. Is SHG movement leading to economic empowerment? Or anything else happening that is beyond economic? Or maybe the inductive can be that, does economic empowerment also lead to some other related agency building phenomena? So that could be something that might emerge from the field. Okay. So you need to actually, the description and comparison come into play in categorization. You're describing the concept represented and distinguishing it from each other. Now, this is a kind of a thing that I picked up from yesterday from one of the, this thing chart is actually from the sources given in the site. Visually, the first, this thing, it looks, your data looks like this. Then once you start coding and thinking of codes, it is distributed. And then, the third circle shows how you are actually kind of coding, right? So it is all clumping together. All the squares come, all the triangles are in one place, all rectangles are in one place, all circles are in another place. The dark circles are brought together. So they're all clumped together now. They're not distributed all across. Then you're going towards the final conclusion of correlation, where you're looking into how one influences the other, and it is answering your research question. The source is given in the side. It's taken from one paper. Okay. So categorizing SHG impacts. Let me give you one more example actually to see what exactly is the categorization of SHG impact. Is coming from our own evaluation of the Puduvalvu project in Tamil Nadu. So one was the economic impact. No, again, as I already have mentioned, debt clearance was something that they were mentioning. Increased savings was something they were mentioning. Helping family. These are all picked codes from the data. So Economic impact is my category. Debt clearance, increased saving, helping family, investment in asset, investment in education, marriage, investment in additional livelihood activities, health expenses. These are my codes. Okay, now you understand. And again, it will not be exactly as it is. Nobody will say health expenses. So they will say, we had somebody fell ill within the family. We were looking for money. I was able to kind of get some money from my SHG savings, and we were able to manage. Okay, then I code this as health expense. Or they'll say that my sister-in-law was getting married and we were short of money. The previous sister-in-law, we had a lot of problems. We were already in debt, but by then I had joined the SHG movement. And when the second sister-in-law got married, I was able to kind of contribute something from my savings. Then we say that, investment in education, or I'm now able to, children come to me to ask for fees rather than go to their father. These are all, I'm not making up these statements, they're coming from the field. And this is how we start coding them. So think that these sentences, one big paragraph will end up being a code called investment in education or investment in marriage. Okay. And all these codes will come under the category of economic impact. Women's empowerment. Nobody said now I'm empowered. Nobody is going to come and tell you that. How does it think? So saying that, has this made a difference to the way people take it, look at you? So they'll say there is increased respect within the family. There is increased awareness now. I know more. I mean, for example, the same this thing, when we went to do the qualitative instrument testing in one of the villages, the qualitative researcher who is an economist had come with me. And people were saying that now I can talk. What do you mean? Now you can talk. So when you people like outsiders come, now I can talk to you without any fear. Before I used to feel very shy, I won't talk. And later on, my friend who is the economist told me, saying that I keep seeing this. I'm now learned to talk, and now I can talk in the quantitative. I was never able to understand what they meant. Did it mean that they never spoke before, or that they're speaking now? But it was only when we did the qualitative and asked the additional questions, saying that what does it mean when you say can now talk? They say that I'm now able to talk to outsiders freely. I'm not scared of talking to some, or going to the banks and transacting. So I can now speak. And can you imagine that that itself is a very big empowerment for women, and we take it for granted as urban women that we can speak. But for rural women, even that, not being hesitant in front of strangers is a big thing. So being consulted within the family, providing guidance and suggestions to their neighbors or friends, gaining courage itself to do transactions, confidence, self-esteem to talk and interact or transact with outsiders, increase mobility. So these are some of the things that are very important. Political participation. So the next thing was that, one of the things that we were trying to see is that does these economic empowerment and women's empowerment lead to any other empowerment factors? So one of the things that we saw is that they were actually more active in Gram Sabha. They were contesting elections. They were acting as vote banks. They would kind of participate in election campaigns, etc. So we also added something called the political participation. So there's something in the literature about political participation. Like, does this economic empowerment also kind of lead to women being more politically active? So we were finding that women were actually contesting elections. Public action is something that we had not thought of. This was an in vivo code. They said that we are now joining the panchayat in actually, fighting against liquor, or when the new project comes to the panchayat, the president calls us and asks us to be involved in this, or we are taking up social issues. So that became public action, which was an in vivo code, and this came from the field. Again, downward accountability, I already gave you an example of this. Ability and inclination to give back to the society and help others. And again, as I said before, they didn't say this the way we've written here. They said that now I want to do something back to the community. I have improved. I want others to feel the same kind of impact. It has made a lot of difference to my life. I would like to see more women do the same. So I want to do something for the community. I want something for the village. So this is what we call as the downward accountability. And these came from the number might have been small. Not everybody showed the same inclination, but it was something that was emerging as an interesting category. Conceptualization now goes into saying that, for example, if you take the data that I presented, does economic empowerment and impact and women's empowerment lead to other kinds of empowerments, or lead to kind of lead to increase in women's agency itself. So here, when we look at it, when you saw the data, it does lead to that. So in terms of conceptualizing or coming out with a grounded theory, this is something that we actually kind of conceptualize. Theory development, again, as I said, is when different kinds of, empirical context travels, it's like what kind of a framework of understanding it builds, and, how does it kind of guide policy. Now we were able to say that the investment in getting women involved in SHG movement in terms of economic impact and women's empowerment is leading to something else. One very interesting thing we found also was that women actually said that, everybody would talk about whenever I had this group discussions, one of the things women would say, two things actually, I think you would find it interesting, is that economic impact was first thing. Everybody would talk about economic impact. Now, how do you take them beyond it, or to kind of also find that what matters to them more? So with one group of women, I told them that in case the government tomorrow's, and they're also talking about how they now go to the district headquarters, meet in the collector's office, part of, different kind of activities. So I said that you all talked about economic impact. So tomorrow the government gives you that money, but does not allow you to travel, but be within the village. Which would you prefer? What you have now, or getting that same amount of money sitting in the village? Immediately they said, no, we actually value mobility, because that has opened up our world. We see that there's a world beyond our village. So this comes from the discussion, so when you look at the data, right in the beginning, we said that, okay, economic empowerment, but how do you get them to rank? Somebody was talking about ranking there, right? So how do you get them to kind of this thing? Another question I asked, and Tamil Nadu women are very kind of politically aware. So one question is that, does your husband tell you whom to vote for? And without prompting, like I think about there were 30 women in that group, everyone said, no way. We sometimes tell our husband whom to vote for, but, we vote for whom we want, and this also shows that, how politically aware this group is itself. So you need to kind of pull from the category and conceptualization into seeing that how this is leading to a kind of a theory building. Now, very quickly, because I think we are kind of coming to an end, and I want to kind of keep some time open for this thing. Question and answers. So there are qualitative softwares. I just try to kind of put some together. NVivo, expensive. Atlas T is also expensive. Deduce is the one we have currently used. It is okay. Data is safe. It is cheaper. Individual pricing is relatively okay. Provalis is also kind of price on request. Whenever they say price on request, keep in mind that it is going to be very expensive. But as I said, if your project is small, and you can do it using Word, or I'm sure now Microsoft Office has a lot of options. You can kind of this thing. Very quickly, writing qualitative research. How do you write qualitative research? What kind of when you've done all this analysis and things like that, how do you bring it together? So you need to kind of bring it together, as I said, again, it's art and science, it takes skill. You have to kind of describe to give the feel of the context to the this thing, but it cannot be fiction. It has to be rooted. It should be a kind of a lovely documentary, so it is rooted in data, it is rooted in structure, but it is, it gives the feel of the visually kind of rich description of your locale, it is challenging. One of the things that is very important is that you have a lot of data. Always distill it rather than reducing it. Reducing means that, if you have a full glass, you're going to throw away half the glass and keep the other half glass. When you're distilling it, you boil it down so that the other half also is kind of strong and it has the flavor of all the data that you have. So you need to kind of, you're focusing on a vast body of data, but retaining its character. You're building complexity. So one of the structure that is actually tells you is that, you're telling a good story. What is the argument that actually kind of supports your tone? Which part of data that you are using to substantiate different aspects, okay? So you can do it thematically, you can do chronologically, or what I like is the onion kind of analogy. You can start from a very broad description and come to the heart of the matter. What is empowerment? What kind of, what is the situation of women, status of women, blah, blah, and then come down to how this intervention has made a difference and how does it kind of fit into this, yeah? So it is gradual. You have to kind of slowly bring in the context, what kind of a village it is, what kind of power structures are there, etc., etc. And then move towards presenting your data effectively, systematically. Always acknowledge, don't claim that you know answer to everything. Be very thorough. Consider that there might be some other possible explanation apart from this. And also say nuance your arguments. Cast light as well as to the shadows, saying that, yes, this is what we know, but we don't know this. So this could also be equally important, okay? And address contradictions, very big upfront and say that, we addressed this, but we found out that this was something emerging as a very interesting thing. This may be needed to study. Reflexivity addresses biases because it's a subjective this thing, so who is saying what has to be kind of analyzed within the framework of bias and subjectivity. Reflexivity, it's your own understanding of it. Be self-reflexive because it enhances the credibility. So you can do vignettes, you can have short stories. You can, if somebody has given you a very powerful statement, use that. One powerful statement we got from one person in Panchayat in Gulbarga district in Karnataka was that I am good to good people and bad to bad people. Now he sounded like Gabbar Singh, okay? And we were wondering, why is he saying this to us? But that was such a powerful statement. We could not kind of not use it. And later on, we found out that he had actually, there is an alleged murder this thing on him. Somebody cast aspersion on his wife's character and he is apparently have gone and chopped off that fellow or something like that. It is an alleged this thing, but it made sense when he gave us this broad, I'm good to good people and bad to bad people kind of this thing. So if that is very powerful quote, use it, but don't use quotes as alternative to kind of your data itself. Quotes are only to highlight what you're trying to say. Okay, don't overuse quotes. Charts, matrices, timelines can be used, flow, oral histories, individual narratives. You can use photographs, you can use a little bit of conversation, depending upon what kind of tools you're using. Okay. Last point is that we have this habit of distilling everything into numbers. Please avoid using percentages and things like that in qualitative because your numbers are very small. 50 or 80% of my sample said this. Now you've interviewed only 10 people and 8 people said it, means it's like 80% doesn't really say anything there. So don't use that. You say that most of my respondents say this or half of my respondents said this. More people said this than that, So these are the ways in which how often it was said. So use words rather than actual percentages or whatever it is. Last part, it's very important. Often qualitative researchers have been accused of going for one outlier and making that into a big story rather than anything else. And particularly when it comes for publication and it's getting refereed, this becomes a huge issue. Okay. So look for recurring patterns. So for example, out of 40 panchayats, like, we found this in more than half our sample. We found this more than, like, of course, set up what is your sample size is, like, when we recurring pattern is if more than your half your population or sample population is saying the same thing, then it is understandable or it's believable compared to one. Okay, so I'll now stop and stop sharing also. So if there are questions, I thought that we will have 10 minutes to kind of catch up. Thank you.
No words, ma'am. It was like a story listening to you, because you are rightly from the field, you spoken from your heart, and it was all visible in your talk. Amazing. Yes. John? Hello, John?
Yes, ma'am. If there are participants, if you have any questions or queries, we can put it in the chat box.
Or else they can raise their hands.
Yes, you can raise your hands and we will unmute you.
There is one question I could see, John.
It's also lunchtime and they must be all very tired, actually.
There is one such question that they have put up.
Yeah.
So it is about, in research, we are trying to measure or analyze satisfaction or perception of any behavioral aspects. Do you recommend qualitative research?
See, it depends exactly on what I would. Okay, let me put it this way. When you're measuring anything that has intangible impacts, it is better to have a qualitative component to it. It could be something like satisfaction, or behavioral aspects. They have both something that is measurable and something that is not measurable, that does not lend itself to measurements, So I would suggest that a small qualitative kind of addition to the research design would actually be very important in this thing. So it depends upon exactly what you're measuring, so.
And there is one more question.
Participatory research differs from action research. Okay, so let me give you participatory research is that where the participatory research itself is a whole new section of qualitative research. It takes qualitative research to another extent, where we are going and saying that it is like literally Robert Chambers says, handing over the stick to the other person. Like we are there to learn from them, and it's not that we know, So there is no researcher and the respondent. We are all together. We all kind of work towards understanding and building new knowledge. Okay, so that is participatory research. You have your research idea, but you are going there saying that we are come here to learn from you, and then we are open to the idea of learning. And participatory research tends to be very visually visual in its depiction. We use social mapping, we use timelines, etc. Action research is where we are trying an intervention and trying to see an impact of that. For example, my very first research journey started with an action research where we used radio to disseminate information on panchayats, and actually we were monitoring these radio groups to see whether their knowledge improved after our radio programs. So we do a pre-intervention survey to assess their basic level of understanding. Then we do the actual intervention. Then we monitor them through. So that is action research, where you're instigating an intervention and trying to study the impact of it. So keep in mind that for action research, you need before and after to see whether that has made any difference. Okay. Somebody had something about mix. I missed that. How do you do a mix of, what do you mean to say do a mix of both? This is in relation to the behavior, I suppose.
Yes, ma'am. She had asked one question before. Yes.
Yeah, so in the behavioral, definitely, if you're doing analyzing satisfaction and things like that, what you can do is that I don't know whether you're economist or whether you're a non-economist. It depends upon where you're coming from. You can do mix of both in different ways. You can use in mixed method, there are different ways of doing it. You can use qualitative to do an exploratory research to understand what are the challenges, okay, and then use that data to do your questionnaire for the quantitative. Or you can do a quantitative, and then to understand something, you can do an additional qualitative component to get a complete holistic picture. The Karnataka research that I was talking about was an embedded design where both quantitative and qualitative were deployed around the same time. So quantitative finished, but we were there for another 2 years to see the impact of the intervention. It was also random control trial, actually, RCT, in some sort of a action research where an intervention was initiated, and we studied the impact of it going forward. This will be employed to study effects of school dropouts. So maybe on committee. Yeah, definitely. This qualitative research lends itself to a whole bunch of things. The challenge is that with qualitative, you cannot generalize because your sample size is always much smaller, and it is not randomized sample. It is more or less like, very selective purposive sampling that we do in qualitative research. Though in mixed method, what we tend to do is that because we are doing quantitative as well as qualitative, we take a subsample of the quantitative randomized sample. So nobody can say you picked purposive sample and that's why you're getting this result. So in mixed method, we generally tend to go with a smaller subsample of the larger sample. But qualitative is generally, as I said, even quantitative researchers do a small module, exploratory module of qualitative FGD to ascertain what they need to kind of, understand for their instruments itself. Or they might do it at the end to explain certain phenomena. They run their regressions, etc., and they find some interesting correlation. Then they do a smaller qualitative to understand why that is coming out. So mixed method is becoming quite important.
John, I think no more questions.
Yes, ma'am. There are no more questions. Ma'am, there is one question which I had.
Yeah, sure.
Suppose if we enter into a research area which is new to us or which is new to the research as well. So where review of literature is also not much in availability. So how do we go about in researches like this when we are doing action research?
See, it's a kind of, it depends. Are you talking about qualitative research or quantitative research?
Yes, ma'am, qualitative research.
Qualitative research. So the idea is that when your literature is also very limited, best is to kind of do couple of FGDs, focus group discussion in different contexts. Say, for example, if you're looking at vaccine hesitancy or something like that, okay, COVID vaccine hesitancy. There's not much literature on it as yet, at least in our country. So what you do is that, you start doing little bits of FGD, and then based on that, you need to kind of come out with an instrument. But as I said, you'll have to keep on revising your instrument going forward because this is an area which is relatively new, and you might be finding new things happening. So keep that in mind and do a small scoping survey kind of, or reconnaissance survey kind of a thing, with FGDs, with the different groups. That would be helpful.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I think we can proceed, John.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, with your permission, I invite Assistant Professor Nivedita Shetty to propose the formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to all. It is my privilege to propose vote of thanks to our today's resource person, Professor Kripa Anand, for devoting her valuable time and enriching our knowledge on qualitative research design, developing coding, data analysis, and writing qualitative research. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful and informative session. I'm grateful to our management and our principal, sir, Dr. Sridhara Shetty, for giving this opportunity and encouragement to conduct this workshop. I would like to thank our Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Liji Santosh, for the great initiative, and Vice Principal and BCom Coordinator, Professor Sandesha Shetty, for all the support and motivation. Thanks to John sir and the technical team for handling today's session. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants for the active participation. Thank you, one and all.
I would like to thank Dr. Santosh for inviting me to be part of this, and wish the rest of the workshop also great success. And I think I'm coming back next week to talk digital data collection. So I will be seeing you again. And thank you all for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.